Something is happening right now that has never happened before in human history. Not war, not disease, not famine. Something quieter than all of those things, and in some ways more significant than any of them. People are stopping. Not being stopped, not prevented, not unable, choosing. Millions of people across dozens of countries with completely different cultures and histories and economies and governments are looking at the possibility of having children and making the same quiet, private decision. No, not for me, not now, maybe not ever. South Korea has a birth rate so low that its population is projected to halve within 2 generations. Japan is facing a demographic collapse so severe, the government is in a state of ongoing panic. Italy, Germany, Spain, Canada, Australia, the wealthiest, safest, most medically advanced societies ever built, the places where a child born today has the highest chance in all of human history of surviving, of being educated, of having access to medicine and food and opportunity. These are the places where people have most decisively stopped having children. And the standard explanations do not hold up. It costs too much. Governments have tried cash payments, subsidized childcare, extended parental leave. The numbers do not move. There is no housing. Countries with affordable housing have the same declining birth rates. People are too focused on careers. Societies where women have fewer career options have higher birth rates, but that has always been true, and it does not explain the collapse in places where those options have existed for decades. Something else is happening, something deeper and more personal and more honest than any of the economic explanations. And this video is going to examine what that something actually is. Not to tell you what to think about it, but because this question, the question of why millions of people are quietly deciding not to continue, is one of the most important questions of this century, and it deserves a real answer. To understand what is happening now, you have to understand what was happening before. For almost all of human history, not having children was not really a choice. It was something that happened to people, a misfortune, a tragedy, a medical reality. Something imposed rather than decided. A woman without children in most societies throughout history carried a social stigma so heavy it functioned as a form of punishment. Her value, her identity, her place in the community, all of it was tied to her role as a mother. A man without children felt that absence in every interaction, in how he was perceived, in how he was treated, in what kind of future he was understood to have. Children were not primarily an emotional decision. They were infrastructure. They were labor on the farm. They were the people who would take care of you when you were old. They were the continuation of the family name, the religious obligation, the economic unit. In a world without pension systems or health care or social safety nets, having children was not a lifestyle choice. It was a survival strategy. You had children because the alternative was to grow old with nobody to care for you and nothing to leave behind. And beyond the practical reasons, there were the cultural ones. Religion told people to be fruitful and multiply. Community expected it. Custom demanded it. Every social structure surrounding a person pointed in the same direction. Have children. Continue. This is what you do. This is what life is for. And so people did. Not because they had examined the decision and concluded it was right, but because the decision had already been made for them by everything around them before they were old enough to ask the question. Then something changed. Contraception arrived and separated sex from reproduction for the first time in history. Economic independence meant women no longer needed a husband to survive and no longer needed children to secure their old age. Welfare states built systems of social support that did not depend on biological heirs. Legal protections changed what family meant and what it required. The entire architecture of necessity that had always made having children feel less like a choice and more like a given, slowly and then rapidly came down. And for the first time, the question became genuinely answerable. Do you actually want this? Not do you have to, not does society expect it, not is it the done thing. Do you, looking honestly at your own life and what you want from it and what you are capable of giving, actually want to bring a child into the world? And when people were finally free to answer that question honestly, the answer, across culture after culture, country after country, was more complicated than anyone had predicted. For some people, the answer was still yes, immediately and completely. But for a growing number of people, the answer was something more like, I'm not sure, or not yet, or I don't think so, or no. And those answers, accumulated across millions of individual private decisions, are what the birth rate data is showing us right now. So what are people actually seeing when they look at the question honestly? The first thing is cost, and not just financial cost. Yes, children are expensive, that is real. The financial pressure on young people in most developed countries is genuine and significant. Housing costs have exploded, salaries have not kept pace. The economic foundation that previous generations could build a family on, a stable job, an affordable home, a degree of financial security, is harder to achieve now than it was for any generation in the post-war period. But if cost were the primary driver, you would expect birth rates to be higher among wealthier people. They are not. The relationship between income and birth rate is complicated and inconsistent. Some of the lowest birth rates in the world are in some of the wealthiest societies. Some of the highest are in some of the poorest. Cost is a factor. It is not the explanation. What people are also weighing, and this is the part that does not fit on a policy paper, is the emotional and psychological cost. The cost of attention, of time, of the specific version of yourself that you will have to become, and the specific version of yourself that you will have to give up. Of the relationships that will change and the freedom that will disappear, and the person you were before children who you will never entirely get back. This is not selfishness. This is honesty. And a generation that has been told more than any previous generation to be honest about what they want and what they can give is applying that honesty to one of the biggest decisions a person can make. The second thing people are seeing is the world their child would be born into. And what they are seeing is genuinely difficult to look at without concern. Jonathan Haidt spent years documenting what has happened to the mental health of young people since the smartphone became universal around 2012. The data is not ambiguous. Depression among teenagers has increased dramatically. Anxiety disorders among young people are at historic highs. Self-harm among teenage girls increased in ways that researchers describe as a crisis. Eating disorders, social anxiety so severe it prevents basic functioning. A generation of young people who have grown up with their developing sense of self exposed to the continuous judgment of hundreds of peers every hour, every day, with no off switch and no escape. These are not marginal statistics. They are the dominant trend in youth mental health across the wealthiest societies on Earth. And the parents who are paying attention to this data, who are watching what is happening to the children around them, are asking a question that previous generations never had the information to ask. What am I bringing a child into? Not in the dramatic existential sense, in the practical sense. If I have a child right now, that child will grow up with a phone in their hand before they can form a stable sense of identity. They will be algorithmically served content designed by people far more resourced than me to capture and hold their attention, regardless of what that does to them. They will be socially compared to hundreds of peers in ways that are continuous and inescapable, and that my generation never had to navigate. And I will be trying to protect them from all of that largely alone, because the village that used to exist to help raise children does not exist anymore, and the systems that have replaced it are not designed with my child's well-being as their priority. This is not an irrational concern. This is a parent looking clearly at the environment they would be launching a child into and asking whether they have what it takes to protect that child from it. And for many people, the honest answer is, I am not sure. The third thing people are seeing is what happened in their own families. This is the thing that nobody says directly, but that sits underneath a huge portion of the decision for a huge portion of the people making it. An enormous share of the current generation of young adults grew up in homes that were damaged in some way. Divorces that were destructive. Parents who stayed together for the children and made the children pay for it in ways that were invisible and expensive. Conditional love, emotional unavailability. Trauma that was passed down without anyone naming it or intending it or knowing how to stop it. The psychological understanding of how damage travels from parent to child to grandchild has never been more developed or more widely available than it is right now. People are reading the books, doing the therapy, understanding in ways their parents and grandparents never could the specific mechanisms by which an unhealthy childhood produces an unhealthy adult who produces another unhealthy childhood. And some of those people are looking at what they carry and asking honestly whether they have done enough work to not pass it forward, whether they are ready in the ways that matter, whether the version of themselves that would show up as a parent is the version they would want a child to have. This is not a failure of love. In many cases, it is the opposite. It is a person who loves children enough to take the responsibility of creating one seriously, who understands what it costs to be raised by someone who is not ready, who is not willing to do that to another person until they are more certain they can do better. The first generation that pauses and says, maybe I should wait until I am actually ready, gets called selfish. But what exactly is selfish about not wanting to repeat the cycle? The fourth thing is loneliness, and this one is perhaps the least talked about and the most significant. Human beings are social animals. We were built for community. Not for the curated performance of community on a screen, but for actual physical presence, for being known by the people around us, for the kind of belonging that does not require a login. The U.S. Surgeon General issued an official warning in 2023 classifying loneliness as an epidemic, not a trend, not a concern, an epidemic with health consequences comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. In a world where we've never been more connected by technology, this should not be possible. And yet, here we are. The structures that used to make the decision to have children feel survivable, the extended family nearby, the neighborhood where everyone knew each other, the religious community that provided support and belonging, the village in the original sense of the word, these have largely dissolved. People are more geographically mobile and more socially isolated than any previous generation. They move cities for work and lose their networks. They scroll through hundreds of faces every day and feel known by none of them. And raising children without a village is a completely different proposition from raising children within one. It is not just harder practically, it's harder psychologically. The idea of adding that responsibility to a life that already feels isolated and unsupported is genuinely frightening to a lot of people. Not because they don't want children, but because they are honest enough to recognize that they don't have the infrastructure to do it well. Zygmunt Bauman called this liquid modernity, a world where everything flows, nothing is fixed, commitments are provisional, and the emergency exit is always available. We want connection, but with the option to disconnect. We want depth, but without the vulnerability that depth requires. We want intimacy, but without the dependency that real intimacy involves. And a child is the one commitment in modern life that does not come with an emergency exit. A child cannot be paused when things get difficult, cannot be put on hold when you need space, cannot be returned when the reality of them turns out to be harder than the idea of them was. A child is irreversible in a world that has made reversibility a core value. For the generation raised on the option to leave, the one thing that cannot be left feels less like a gift and more like a trap. The fifth thing is something even harder to name, something that sits underneath all of the practical concerns and does not have an easy answer. It is the question of what you are actually giving someone when you bring them into the world. Most people, when they think about having children, think about the good parts, the love, the connection, the meaning, the version of themselves that becomes through parenthood something larger and more purposeful than they were before. They think about the best moments, the milestones, the relationship that will last their whole life and extend beyond it. What they think about less, what the culture does not encourage thinking about, is the full package, not just the good parts, all of it. The person you bring into the world will experience fear, not might, will. They will experience loss. They will lie awake at some point in their life with the weight of something too heavy to carry and no obvious way to put it down. They will love people who will die. They will build things that will be destroyed. They will want things they cannot have and have things they cannot keep. They will experience grief and failure and rejection and the specific cruelty that other human beings are capable of. None of this is a reason not to have children, Billions of people have looked at the full package and decided it is worth it, that the love and the connection and the meaning outweigh everything else, and they are not wrong to conclude that. But the question is more honest now than it has ever been. The automatic answer that previous generations gave, of course it is worth it, of course you should continue, of course life is a gift, is no longer automatic for everyone. For a growing number of people, it is a question they are actually sitting with, not rhetorically, genuinely, turning it over, looking at it from all sides, trying to answer it honestly rather than reflexively. And that is new, historically unprecedented, a species that for its entire existence continued without pausing to examine whether continuation was the right choice, now has, for the first time, enough members with enough freedom and enough language to pause and ask the question seriously. So what does all of this mean? Is the birth rate decline a tragedy, a crisis, a civilization in the process of giving up on itself? Or is it something more complicated than that? Is it possible that what looks like decline is actually, in some cases, a form of maturity? A generation applying the same honesty to the decision to create life that it is trying to apply to every other major decision, not continuing automatically, not because it was told to, not because the alternative was social punishment, but because it actually thought about it and arrived at an honest answer. Both things can be true simultaneously. Some of the decline is driven by financial pressure and housing costs and the genuine difficulty of modern life. Some of it is driven by loneliness and the collapse of community and the absence of the village. Some of it is driven by fear of the environment, of what social media is doing to children, of climate change, of a future that feels more uncertain than any previous generation had reason to feel. And some of it is something more philosophically significant. Some of it is people taking the question seriously for the first time, looking at what they have to offer, at what the world has to offer, at what they carry from their own childhood and whether they have done enough with it, and arriving, honestly, at an answer that is not the automatic yes. There is no policy that changes this, no cash payment that gets to the root of it, because the root of it is not economic. The root of it is a fundamental shift in how people understand the decision and what they think they owe to the person they would be creating. Previous generations continued because the structures around them made continuation feel like the only option. This generation is the first to face the question without those structures, and the answer it is giving, quietly, privately, in millions of individual decisions across dozens of countries, is telling us something about what the question actually contains when you look at it honestly. Not a verdict on life, not a rejection of love or meaning or connection, something more specific than that. A recognition that these things, the love and the meaning and the connection, are not automatic. They are not guaranteed by the act of having a child. They have to be built. They require things from you. And not everyone is sure they have those things ready. And maybe the most honest thing that can be said about all of this is this. The question of whether to have children has always been one of the biggest questions a person can face. For most of human history, nobody was actually allowed to answer it. They were just told what the answer was. For the first time, people are answering it for themselves, and the answer is more complicated than the question expected. There is a place where this conversation continues without the need to keep it comfortable, where the debates happen, where the harder versions of these questions get asked and answered directly, where nothing is softened for an audience that was not asked if they wanted to be protected from the real thing. If this video opened for you, if it named a question you have been sitting with, the link is in the description. It is the private room. And what happens there is nothing like what happens here. The next video goes somewhere most people are not ready to go.